Welcome everybody and welcome to this theory video, which is going to be looking at something we call market-orientated strategies. So what we're looking at here is what can be done through market-orientated strategies to support improved economic growth and development within an economy. Right, okay, now what I would like to do please is to start off by jotting down question 1A and 1B. Hit pause, write down your answer, and once you've done that, if you can then hit play, please. Welcome back, everybody. Now, just to go through these two questions, and what you should have hopefully written down is that market-orientated strategies are about promoting the role of the free market economy. So in other words, the government are reducing their role in the workings of the state. They're allowing households and firms through supply and demand and market forces to make more decisions. So the government are reducing their role in the state. Now, clearly, this differs to interventionist strategies. Interventionist strategies are about the government intervening more, whereas market-oriented strategies are about promoting the free market, so moving more towards a free market economy and the government reducing their role in the workings of the country. The logic is market-orientated people would argue that the market mechanism is better at allocating resources. Governments, when they intervene, they often fail. So we want to reduce the role of government as much as possible. Right, now anyway, what we're going to be looking at are several different forms of market-orientated strategies. And remember, they all involve the government limiting and reducing their role in the workings of the state. In the last video, what we did, we looked at something called protectionism, so imposing things such as tariffs, quotas, and what these things do, they often lead to consumers having to buy more expensive domestic goods and services. So that means that domestic firms don't have to compete with foreign firms. What we're going to do now, we're going to remove those protectionist policies. Now, what this should do, if we remove these protectionist policies, it allows foreign firms to compete with domestic firms in the economy. And what this competition should do, it should lead to more efficiency. If we expose domestic firms to foreign firms, it means that to keep hold of their customers, they've got to work harder. They've got to lower prices, raise quality and become more efficient. And efficiency is always a great way of incentivizing economic growth and development. It leads to more investment into capital, more investment into better technology, which will drive up productivity across the country. Further to this, if we remove protectionism, it will allow consumers within an economy to access cheaper imports. Well, that allows people to improve their living standards if they can access cheaper goods from across the world. And that might help more people escape poverty within a country. Further to this, though, as well, what protectionism does, it allows inefficient firms to carry on producing goods and services. In 4.1, we looked at a theory called comparative advantages. If we allow domestic firms to compete more with foreign firms, it will mean that domestic firms that are inefficient and can't compete will disappear. But that would then mean that those resources will move towards more efficient industries in the country. So things that we are more productive at focusing on, and that can lead to better wages for people. Further to that as well, if more resources are steered towards things in an economy that we are good at, this would allow for us to export more across the world and generate more export earnings and access more foreign currency, which allows us to buy better imports within a country. The next one is about promoting FDI, so trying to get big foreign firms to invest into an economy. This can be achieved through trade liberalisation, so opening up ourselves to more international competition. It creates a platform for foreign firms to want to invest. If they think they can base production there and import what they need and export across the world. It could also be done by tax incentives. So in other words, saying to foreign firms, come here and we will reduce taxes that you've got to pay. And that could incentivize these big firms to want to come into the economy. Now, if we can get these big foreign firms to want to move into an economy, they're going to bring with them expertise, technology, capital, better ways of producing goods and services. This would therefore allow for better jobs to become available, And it also means that the economy's got better access to capital, which can fuel more economic growth. Big foreign firms as well might invest into workers, which will develop human capital and therefore boost productivity further. What these big foreign firms might also do, they may create multiplier effects. They're going to create formal jobs where people pay taxes. That allows for the tax base to increase across the economy. So governments have more funds available to invest into infrastructure and human capital, better education. It might also act as a catalyst for other firms to want to move into the country. So, for example, if you attract a huge car manufacturer into your country, they might then attract the supply network that is needed to support that big car industry within your economy. Okay, so trade liberalisation, promotion of FDI are two huge strategies to support growth and development. Problems of them, though, could be, well, trade liberalisation. It could mean that what you're good at producing is very low level or low paid output in agriculture. If that's the case, it will prevent you developing domestic industries. They can't compete. Promoting FDI, well, if you get big foreign firms to come into your economy, are they here simply to exploit workers and exploit the environment? If so, there's not a lot of benefits for the domestic economy of getting these huge foreign firms to move in. It could lower living standards. Next two, we've got something we call here removal of government subsidies and a floating exchange rate system. Right now, government subsidies, if we were to give subsidies to firms, it's encouraging inefficiency. We're propping up firms who are ultimately failing, and it also incentivizes moral hazard. The idea is if you give people lots of money, then they become reliant on it and have no real incentive to invest themselves. If we remove government subsidies, we're forcing those firms to naturally become more efficient. They can't rely on government support anymore. They're facing more competition from foreign firms, and that should incentivize them to want to invest and develop their businesses. Now, what removing government subsidies will also do, it would lead to what we call sunset industries, things that we're not very good at, disappearing from the economy. And that would allow them resources they used to hog to be redeployed into more efficient industries based on comparative advantage. And that could lead to, more export earnings, higher productivity, and better wage rates. Now, the next one is a floating exchange rate system. If we're no longer having to manipulate exchange rates upwards or downwards, then we're freeing up the policies we used to use to prop these up to supporting better macroeconomic targets. Also, if we're not going to be manipulating our currency downwards, then it means that firms can't rely on a weaker currency to export more. They've got to become more competitive if they want to succeed. And again, that leads to more investment and more efficiency improvements in these firms. And that again should support growth and development. Right, now, just a question here, well, a couple of questions I want you to pause and put down the answers to. So what I would like to now do, please, in your books, is to pop down a simple explanation of how these 4 different policies can support growth and development, and put down a problem of each strategy. So why they should support growth and development, but then a problem associated with these different policies. Right, so hit pause before you look at this, please. Right, now you're all back. There are 2 final policies I want to focus on. The first one is a microfinance scheme. What we know is in developing economies in particular, people often find it very difficult to access credit. So they can't get loans, and that prevents entrepreneurship. It stops people investing into better capital, setting up businesses, and that therefore prevents incomes from growing across a country. What microfinance do, they're often set up by NGOs. They allow people in poor countries to access credit. So it's small loans offered to people like farmers, the self-employed, shopkeepers, and in particular women who often suffer from gender inequality in these countries. Now, if these people can now access more credit, they can set up their businesses, they can invest into more capital, and that would therefore lead to them being able to generate higher incomes and escape poverty. They can maybe even start employing people, which would support lower unemployment and help people escape absolute and relative poverty in the country. A problem with microfinance schemes, though, is that the interest rate on these loans tends to be very high. And obviously, if people make investments and they fail in these countries, which is likely due to poor human capital, they could be saddled with huge debts they often can't afford to repay. A final market-orientated strategy is privatisation. In many countries across the world, many of the large industries are nationalised. They're owned by the state. So within an economy, you might find that the power supplies, the water supplies, key industries are owned by the government. You tend to find that when government-owned big industries, they're not focused on profit. So they tend to be really, really inefficient. What we're now going to do, we're going to sell off these big industries to private businesses from across the world. So, for example, if we can get large utility companies from France or Germany taking over power supplies in an economy, they're doing it for profit. It would lead to more efficiency as they drive to improve standards to generate more money. What we can also do is we can bring in more competition. We can allow other firms to provide these essential services, and that would often lead to, again, more competition and more efficiency creeping in. And obviously, if these industries are sold off to big foreign firms in rich countries, these firms that will take them over will bring them expertise, better capital, which will again boost productivity and lead to more investment into these industries in these countries. What this will also do, though, it will raise lots of money for the government by selling off these industries, and that can be used to, again, upgrade infrastructure, provide more human capital. So it could provide the funds for more government intervention in other areas of the economy. A big problem with this, though, is that these firms are about profit. Will they start charging consumers high prices? Profits, of course, will be extracted out of the country, which will mean that it starts to benefit other countries across the world. Right, final question, everyone. So question 3. Again, can you jot down your answers for these questions? And be prepared to show me these when we're back in class, your answers. The big one I want to focus on is the bottom one. Which do you believe out of the 6 strategies I've been through is the most realistic? Please justify your answer. So is it the microfinance? Is it the privatisation? Is it going to be the floating exchange rates? Is it going to be the remove government subsidies? Is it going to be about trade liberalisation? Or is it going to be about promoting FDI? As a throwaway final point of them, please remember that market-orientated strategies are about encouraging more businesses, more investment to take place. It's about allowing market forces to make more decisions, with the logic being that what this will do, it will incentivize people to work harder. It incentivizes firms to compete and invest. And all these things should spearhead more growth and development within these economies. Right, everyone, thank you very much. That is the end of this video.